Hey guys, I'm Amanda, the Botanical Brunette, and welcome to my channel. So, we're going to be talking about something kind of juicy today. I am going to be talking about 5 houseplant care myths, and I'm going to debunk them. These are the top 5 house care plant tips, houseplant care tips that I have heard in the past that are absolutely like false. They're not really like the best practice. So I'm going to be talking about those today, and we're going to be kind of talking about why they are myths and basically like what you can do alternatively instead of doing this or that. When I first got started in the houseplant care world, I was like told so many different things. Oh, you should do this, but you shouldn't do that, or do this and don't do that. Kind of like it throws you through a whirlwind and you're like, I don't know what's right. And basically, like when you have houseplants, you're gonna make those houseplant care mistakes. You're gonna listen to grandma's old gardening secrets, and they may not work for you. I'm just gonna say that. They may not work for you. And some of these houseplant care myths are going to be some that you guys may disagree with. Some that you may do to this day, and you're like, actually, it works for me, and that's great. Honestly, like that's amazing. But these are ones that I did that I found are not true, and that are they do not work. They don't work for me, at least. I just avoid them. But before we get into that, please like this video at the end of the video. And if you haven't subscribed already, please consider subscribing. And without further ado, let's get into it. Let's debunk some of these houseplant care myths. And I also have a blog on this that I will link down below so you guys can check that out as well. It kind of gives you like a more in-depth, like a written version of this video, so you'll be able to kind of also reference back to that as well. But let's talk about the first myth that is just absolutely false, and that is using rocks for drainage. Now, this is a plant care tip that can go back to like grandmas, grandpas, back to old school gardening, like using rocks and pebbles for drainage. I'm not going to say that it doesn't work temporarily. I used to exclusively use like candle jars, and I still do, but I'll put like a grower pot in like there and plant the plant in the grower pot. But I used to just plant a plant straight into a candle jar and just put like rocks in the bottom and like about an inch layer of rock, and that's drainage, right? Because the water just will drain through and go into the rocks, and then boom, you have drainage. Well, you think about that, the water has nowhere to go and it is trapped in the soil, so it's not going to evaporate as much as it would if it was in open air. Where's that water gonna go? It's just gonna keep piling up into those rocks and just keep piling up. And a lot of the times the water, when you're watering your plants, when you top water, it does get rid of a lot of some salts. Well, over time, that water's gonna rise up, the roots are gonna start to be attracted to the water and absorb all that nasty water that's been building up for months or years. I will say that if you have a drainage hole in the pot, it can help drain the water through. But I would not use pebbles exclusively as a drainage source in a non-draining pot. I will say that when you repot that plant, it's gonna be such a mess. It's gonna be such a mess. When I used to do that, I had a lot of cacti and succulents when I first started out like a couple of years ago. And I would do that. I would just throw rocks at the bottom, and then eventually they would grow around the rocks. And when you took it out, it'd be root bound, but it would be root bound around rocks. and you're pulling it out and the rocks are falling everywhere and you have to get the roots off the rocks. It's just such a mess where you could just shake soil off. It's just easier if you just have a drainage hole. Now, I posted on my Instagram, I posted a reel of me making a drainage hole in a ceramic pot. A lot of times I'll get pots at like Home Goods, Michael's, Marshall's, like those kind of places, and a lot of times they don't have drainage holes. I have found a method to put drainage holes in pots with these like diamond drill bits that you can get. And basically what you do is you put it on an electric drill and you drill through. I'll do a video on how to do this a little bit more in depth once I do it a couple more times and really get like the gist of it and just make sure that I don't on camera bust a pot through. But I made a reel, so you guys can check that out. I will link that below so you can see the reel. Yeah, so like you can put drainage holes in really any pot. These diamond drill bits I got on Amazon for like, I have to say less than $15. And it came with, I think like 10 to 12 different sizes. So you can get really big ones or you can get really small ones for like smaller pots. It does also drill through glass. So if you're using like those candle jars, you can drill right through glass. You do have to be careful with that, I will just say, because you can cut yourself or you can bust through the jar. If you put too much pressure on the drill, you can bust through it. There are other methods. If you don't want to go through drilling, put the plant in a grower pot and just put the grower pot in there. You can even cut around. If the grower pot sticks out too much, you can just cut the grower pot a little bit just so it's not kind of coming outside of the pot. So there are methods that you can do. Like I said, I know there are gonna be people out there that are gonna be like, Amanda, I swear by this method. This is the only thing that like helps my plants, and that's great and that's amazing. But for me, that was the biggest culprit of my root rot, is just not having drainage. That is number one, biggest myth. But we got 4 more myths to go over. All right, so the second myth that I want to talk about today is something that I do, but to an extent. Now, I know I have mentioned this before, so don't come at me about it, but I want to talk about watering your plants consistently on a weekly, like very strict schedule. Don't water your plants on a strict schedule, guys. Check them on a strict schedule. Every Monday, Mondays are my day that I check all my plants and I water what needs to be watered. If I know, I'll make a mental note, or you can even, when I had like over 100 plants, I would write down what plant was like, kind of like didn't need water, but like maybe in a few days, I'd write it down and then I'd check back on Thursday to see how that plant was doing. And that's what you guys can do. You can just always check back on your plant. And I know people have busy schedules. I know that. I know it can suck. But you know what? A plant will also be okay if you go through, let's say on a Monday, you go through, you check all your plants, and there's a plant that doesn't need water. It's gonna be fine if you wait another week. It might be a little sad, it might droop a little bit before next Monday, but you'll find that it is easier to bring back a plant that is too dry than a plant that has root rot. A lot of times when I first started out, I was like, plants need water every week. So I'd water them. No checking the soil, no moisture meter, nothing. I just would go through and I would just water everybody. And then I would get root rot. And I'm like, why? Why is this happening? So I would say just check on your plants once a week. Don't water always once a week. So this one's actually kind of funny. I hear it still to this day and it makes me laugh because let me just get to the logic, but let me just tell you this myth first. People say that if you put a plant in a bigger pot, it will grow that pot and it will get bigger. In theory, yes. It will. When you have a small plant and you put it in a bigger pot, it will have room to grow. And that is, yes, like that is correct. All plants have a certain growth limit. If they didn't, can you imagine how big plants would be outside? Can you imagine how big like grass would be? Can you imagine how big plants would be in the wild if plants didn't have a growth limit? It would be insane. We would all live in Jurassic Park and it would be crazy. Plants have a limit. In their genetic makeup, they have a growth limit. Yes, a plant that might be root bound in a smaller pot, if you put it in a bigger pot, it will grow to that pot and it will just keep growing and growing and growing, but eventually you'll find that you won't need to keep repotting as often. And also, that also goes to show, so when I was doing my research for this, people were also saying the opposite. So like they were saying like, don't put a little plant in a big pot because it will die because it won't have enough. Okay, really guys? I mean, if that was the case, we would never be able to plant anything in the ground outside, because you got to think about how much surface area like a little plant would have in the ground outside. That's not true at all either. So just keep that in mind as well, that is complete false. It may look a little silly to have like a little plant in a giant pot, but it's really aesthetics. It's not gonna like die if you do that. So that is another myth. This next plant myth might have people in the comment section coming at me, and that is misting your plants and using pebble trays increases humidity. That is false. It is false in a sense. When you mist your plant, you increase the humidity until it dries. Once it dries, it's back to the regular room humidity. You're not building a dome over the plant. That's why when we have humidifiers going, they're going all day, all day, all day, all day, going, going, going. You got to think about it. If once that dries, you have to go back and mist it again to keep up with the humidity. And that is like a full-time job. Like you will be there all day misting your plants. Nobody has time for that. And then another reason why you shouldn't be misting your plants is because when you don't have a lot of good airflow, if the water doesn't evaporate fast enough, it can cause fungal infections on the leaves. So you don't want that as well. You don't want sitting water just sitting on the leaves. I'm sure your plants will enjoy a good misting every once in a while, but to increase the humidity, it's just not gonna work. You gotta think about the plants that are outside. They're constantly getting wind and airflow like through, where like a lot of the times the air in your house is pretty stagnant unless you have like fans going. Also with pebble trays, they do increase humidity. The function of a pebble tray is you basically get a plate or any kind of container. You put pebbles down and then you pour water over it. Enough that the plant is not going to absorb water through the drainage hole, but just enough that it's going to evaporate. Think about how tall pots are. They're around, I mean, for me, they're around like a foot tall, maybe half a foot or more. You're only going to get humidity in just a small amount of area in a pebble tray. You would have to enclose the plant that's on the pebble tray to give it that humidity, because it's just gonna evaporate into the air and it's just gonna go away. You're basically giving humidity to the base of your pots. Now, you can increase humidity if you have a pebble tray and you really gather a lot of plants around. That can help increase the humidity, because what it does is it kind of creates a little bit of like an ecosystem, almost like a natural dome, and it kind of helps increase the humidity, but not that much. I mean, you'll only notice maybe a few % more than your normal house, but it's not going to be like a humidifier. Just get a humidifier. You can get humidifiers I've seen them for $5. I've seen them for hundreds of dollars. Like, they're affordable. There's a bunch of different ranges, sizes. Just get a humidifier. It's just gonna help your plants be happy. And the last pretty big myth that I hear often, and it's kind of misconstrued a little bit, is low light plants don't need any sun. Low light plants, they kind of define low light as it's not going to get any direct sunlight rays. When you have a window and you have sun coming in, the first few feet is normally, like say a southeast facing window, the first few feet is going to be your direct sun. It's gonna be blasting on those plants. And then the ones on the bottom are going to be your medium light plants. They're gonna get a lot of bright light, maybe some sun rays here and there depending on the day. And then your low light is going to be like a few more feet back from the window. They still need bright light. They still need some sort of sun. I hear all the time like people are saying like, oh, my Sansevierias and my ZZ plants are just doing terrible. I don't know why. I have them in my bathroom that has no natural light. And I'm like, well, they need some sort of light to survive. I mean, that's how they get their energy. So just know that just because it says low light doesn't mean no light. I feel like a lot of times I have been a culprit of this where I'm like, oh, you guys have a room with no, like my husband right now has a Sansevieria in his office that has no natural light and it was doing terrible. It was just constantly rotting and dying and we're like, I don't know what's going on. So we moved it. My husband has like French doors on his office. So we moved it in front of one of the like stable doors, the ones that don't really open that often. And now it's doing fine. It's growing like new pups. It's like completely changed from just a little bit of light it got. Your plants sometimes can deal with no light for a short period of time, but in the long run, you'll still want to give that plant a little bit of natural light or even a grow light. You can get grow lights now. You can get like light bulbs to put in lamps. Even if it's an ugly lamp or it's a ugly strip of light. Like I used to have like purple grow lights and I would like run those like kind of like later on in the day where like no one was around because like I was like, oh, they're ugly. But like they're gonna help your plants like thrive. They're gonna help your plants just like grow better. If you're in like an office area, you can always just get a grow light lamp. You can even use a grow light as a light. Like it's totally fine. I would just say like, just make sure that your low light plants get some sort of light throughout the day, even if it's just a little bit of like a filtered, brighter light area. So that's it. Those are some myths that I have heard all like throughout my entire plant parenthood, whatever you want to call it. I have heard those myths, and these are also myths that I used to do. These are plant myths that I have learned the hard way, and now I can share with you guys. So let me know in the comments if you guys do any of these, or if there's any that like I have maybe missed out and I can do like a part 2. So let me know like what plant myths have you heard, and also let me know in the comments if you do any of these, and let me know like if they work out for you, because I would love to hear that too. I would love to, you know, like I feel like a lot of people still put rocks in the bottom of their pots. So that's it for today. I hope you guys all have a great day and stay botanical.